I'm very pleased to be joined by Hugo Lindgren. He's the editorial director of New York Magazine. Welcome to CityWide.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
So if New York Magazine were to rank the most influential media outlets in New York City, where would New York Magazine rank, and what would you say about it?
Where would it rank? Well, it would, top 5, I guess, just including print or all forms.
Let's say print.
It's a difficult question for the first one. I have to say, I have to be a little humble. I think like a lot of things, it depends on what particular thing you're talking about. We have real established expertise in some areas where I really think we're number one. And for some other topics, maybe people go for the New York Times first.
So what is the significance of New York Magazine?
What is the significance? Well, it's helpful to think about how it started, because one of the things we're really doing with the magazine is kind of embracing the roots of it. And the magazine started in the late 60s, in part because the founding editor, Clay Felker, kind of looked around and realized that there was this huge city that was going more or less uncovered by the New York Times and by other major media organizations. And at the time there were many more newspapers, daily newspapers in New York, although they were sort of dwindling, and there was nothing kind of stepping into the void. And he realized that also that there was this incredible sort of community of young writers, very talented young people who sort of had this desire to tell stories, and there was all this sort of enthusiasm and talent out there that was sort of untapped. And he tapped into it and assembled a great young staff of people and sort of asked them to write about what they knew and what they saw in the city, as opposed to writing about worldly events all the time and sort of big abstract issues. It
was also a time where the city was teetering between its past as a sort of a vibrant, particularly right after World War II, very successful Wall Street, sure. Madison Avenue. And what the next couple of decades were going to be, white flight, people leaving the city, and this insecurity about it. So to some extent, I think New York Magazine represented an affirmation of what New York City could be and is today, but it was a pretty gutsy move at the time.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think that he did was, what was forming there, while a lot of the bad things were going on that you're talking about in the sort of 70s kind of arrived, was that there was sort of a new kind of New York was being born that I think we now sort of see in all its kind of splendor, but which at the time was hidden by a lot of these big changes and the changes in a lot of neighborhoods and the outer boroughs and the sort of economic malaise that happened and the downsizing of a lot of sort of big corporations that were here that started to leave. But there was a kind of vibrancy about urban living that was starting to happen in Manhattan and was spreading to other places also, and he really sort of understood that, and the magazine was about that, even though there was a lot of other things going on also.
Well, it also became a model that I don't know that, I mean, you have the New Yorker, and I guess some people confuse the two, one perhaps more literary, and the other perhaps more embracing the culture of the city. But now cities around, every major city around the country, and I guess in other places in the world, have their version of New York Magazine also.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things New York, what Clay Felker did, he really founded the City Magazine. And so, you look in Philadelphia Magazine, Boston Magazine, Los Angeles Magazine, these are sort of excellent publications that are really vital to the people who live there. And I think Philadelphia existed before New York Magazine, but the form, some of the things that Clay Felker kind of dreamed up. I mean, even funny little things like the Underground Gourmet were revolutionary and were quickly copied sort of all over the place.
The magazine, I think, for a lot of people, acts as a third-party validator. If you say that a play is worth seeing, it's worth seeing. I mean, sure. If you spot a trend, then it becomes important to people. Is that what you view as part of the mission of the magazine?
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely. I mean, and it's really part of the history of the magazine. I mean, there are certain terms that were really invented by New York Magazine. A famous cover story that Tom Wolfe did, I guess it was probably in the early 70s. I'm not exactly sure that it was called Radical Chic.
Sure.
There was the term couch potatoes, which came a little later. There were television shows that were started based on New York Magazine articles. The television show Taxi was based on this terrific story by Mark Jacobson, who's actually still a staff writer at the magazine, as one of our sort of one of our greatest talents. And really, one of the things that really was true about New York Magazine was that it was at the center of the culture in its right when it started and through the 1970s. And it started to the media landscape got a lot more crowded since then, and there's so many people competing for the same thing. So it's a little harder for us to have the primacy that we once did, but we absolutely feel like our cultural critics have an authority to say what play to see, or which movies or which TV shows, and our like food critics are very well respected, and I think we really do rival the Times and Frank Bruni with our food coverage, and I think people really trust our view on it.
So how many people read the magazine because of the back of the book and not the front of the book, the listings? Q Magazine winds up in the pages of New York.
It's a good question. We do surveys. We talk to people all the time. We're always interested to know. And one of the great things about New York Magazine is it's sort of several magazines all kind of combined in one. And I don't know that it even breaks down in terms of a back of the book, front of the book kind of thing, as much as some people read the little gossip items and they look at the restaurant listings. Some people just look at the shopping pages and they read Chris Smith's political column. Everybody kind of creates their own magazine out of like all that we have every week. So it's not just but I think there's a lot of interest in the shopping stuff, in the food stuff. I mean, it's a vital sort of force in the magazine, and we take a lot of pride in it. We just our holiday gift guide that we did recently was ranked #1 in all the holiday gift guides by Slate, the online magazine, and we were really excited about that. It's not everything we do, but it was a big deal, and also in that sort of people talk about your political pieces, they talk about a lot of the things you do, but you don't usually get props for your for your shopping coverage. So we were really happy to get it.
This is, I think, your second stint at the magazine. You worked there previously, so I guess you have some sense of the history of it. The magazine has always been known for its identification, not just of trends, but of people. The most powerful people in New York, the most powerful people in culture. Sure. Was it that you, and I say you, Felker and everybody since then, did you create the celebrity culture, or were you just one of the first serious publications to identify it and report on it?
Well, it is a little chicken egg. I don't think we can claim to have invented the celebrity culture, but it's it's one of the many sort of pools we like to swim in. We did a cover this summer that was very popular, and I think is making a bunch of year-end lists for best magazine cover of the year. That's called Celebrity Psychos, and it was a really fun piece. That there's a great picture of Tom Cruise and his new wife, sort of in straitjackets that we'd sort of drawn up, and it was a very wonderful sort of because people are interested in it, they're kind of sick of it, they're kind of and I think we were right in the right place on that in terms of giving a little funny twist to it, a little wink. And not taking it too seriously, but indulging people's kind of interest in it.
Well, the same thing with the notion of the Hollywood brat pack. It's,
sure.
And sort of not being afraid to point out the foilables of the people that you cover, the way some of the magazines that are only about celebrities might be.
Yeah, well, that's a difficult thing, because now when you want to talk to celebrities, you have to go through layers and layers of people, and if you have a history of writing things that they don't like, it's a little more difficult. But on the other hand, if you have a history of producing high quality things that attract attention, which we do, they do want to talk to you, even if there's a little bit of a risk involved sometimes.
And sometimes there's a risk of them striking back. Say Howard Stern.
Howard Stern, that's right. He was on the cover of our magazine, and it's a really wonderful piece by Steve Fishman, who's another one of our really great writers, and I actually think Howard was very pleased with the piece. I believe that's true. But he didn't like the cover, which was funny because it was a very beautiful cover, I thought, and his hair looked fantastic. But he felt, I don't know, he was on and on about it on his show. I'm not a faithful Howard Stern listener, so I didn't hear it firsthand. But it was the talk of the office, and he very badly wanted the editor-in-chief to come on and defend the magazine on this show, which we declined to do. But it was good. It was all good fun, and I think he had a good time with it, and that's Howard Stern's way. And so,
well, it's also his way of milking the story one more time to let everybody know that he had been on the cover of New York Magazine.
And we were happy to have him do that. So I guess it worked out for all parties.
CityWide will continue right after this.
Mrs. Johnson, good to see you again. This is Mike. You can trust him. He looks just like you.
I'll be sucking up to you in order to make you sign the loan.
So, here are your low monthly payments and interest rate as we promised. Here's where they triple. The rest of this is really just here so that we get your house when you can't pay us back.
Such a lovely house.
Predatory lenders are never this easy to spot. Call us and protect yourself with the facts.
Welcome back to CityWide. We're speaking with Hugo Lindgren, the editorial director of New York Magazine. As an editor, as an editorial director, most of what you deal with is words. But from the history, from the very beginning of New York Magazine, the look of the magazine was something that was very important. And it's something that you've been very involved with since you came back to the magazine. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, one of the things that New York Magazine really did was it invented the look also of the modern magazine. And there was a very, you know, a huge figure, Clay Felker, sort of the Babe Ruth of magazines, and Milton Glaser, the design director, was really the Lou Gehrig. I mean, they were really like they were both sort of huge figures and incredibly influential. And Milton Glaser really designed in the way the departments looked, in the graphic treatments, and a lot of there was a sense of humor. There was you know, magazines. It's hard to remember, but were more like newspapers the way they looked. A lot of them, not all of them, but Esquire was changing things at the same time. And actually a lot of Clay Felker had worked at Esquire, and there were a bunch of people who came over from Esquire to New York Magazine. There was a sort of underground tunnel. And so the magazine did through the 70s was very much a sort of laboratory of design.
Even the logo itself, the New York, has become now iconic in its own way.
Exactly, and in fact, we slightly when we redesigned the magazine last year, we slightly changed the logo, mostly just made it bigger and it's a few little tweaks, but it still is essentially the same thing. We can't really change it because it is too well known. But now, you know, the magazine is a lot more complex in terms of its moving parts than it's ever been. And our design team, Luke Haymans, who our art director, is just he's just an incredible magician. I mean, every week the amount of things that we put in the magazine, and he just has these beautiful little touches. We did the story recently on Ken Langone, who is a sort of Wall Street guy who's getting involved in the governor's race.
Taking on Eliot Spitzer.
And we had this little picture of Eliot Spitzer that had darts in it, and it was so perfectly done, just a beautiful little illustration. There's just all these little grace notes throughout the magazine. In addition to, I think, an overall spectacular looking package, he just has these beautiful little touches, and they work late into the evening getting those things exactly right.
Is there a dumbing down of content? Do you think that the editorial standards, it's hard to reach a mass audience at a high level?
You know, some comment, it's not dumbing down. You know, you have to speak to at several different speak to several different audiences simultaneously. We have a big magazine. It comes out every week. We have a lot of different things in there. We have funny little things in the back. We have the approval matrix, which is a sort of a little reading of pop culture, and it's all little jokes and little funny things, and it's something people love to read on the bus, and it's like a perfect little, you know, 10 minutes, 5 minutes out of your day. And then we do, you know, 5,000, 6,000 word pieces in the middle of the magazine on politics, and on we did a big package on abortion in New York City recently, and those are very serious things, and what we want to do is try to balance it so that there's lighter fare there's stuff on movie stars, and there's things on sports figures, and then there is serious stuff when people do want to spend a little more time with something and do have, you know, a little more brain power left at the end of the day.
So I was looking at a recent issue, and I must admit, in preparing for the show, I read it much more carefully than I might otherwise
I hope that keeps up.
have flipped through. But I found the F word 3 times in one issue. 3 times in one issue, twice before page 22.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. You know, it is. You know, we try not to be to censor, you know, what people say too much. There are other people who complain about that, and you know, it's something we should watch for. You don't want to. You don't want to. We are, as we joke sometimes, although it's true, we are a family magazine. We want people to read it with their kids and everything. So while we're not going to censor what people say, we also don't want to get carried away with it.
What is the profile of a New York Magazine reader?
Well, it's a good question, actually. We ask our staff this sometimes because we want to know what they think, and it really is all over the map. You know, it's a professional, largely Manhattan living person, although not exclusively. And they're actually, one of the surprising things is how many people outside the city read it. It's much more than I expected when I looked at the numbers. But you know, a professional person who you know, makes an okay salary and is a pretty ambitious person and wants to know you know, what's going on politically in the city and also where to eat well.
The gentrification or regentrification of the city, I guess, has probably been good for your subscription bases. Manhattan has been repopulated and parts of Brooklyn and Queens.
Sure.
But 40% of the city today is now foreign-born. 50% if you count the next generation. How do they relate to a New York magazine?
You know, I have to say, I'd be lying if I told you I really knew. We certainly do. You know, we try to present a diverse view of the city and an inclusive one that is. You know, we want people who want to know what's going on in New York and want to get excited about things, no matter who they are, to want to pick up the magazine. You know, we're you know, one of the things that's been true from the magazine from the beginning is the magazine is not about exclusivity. I think sometimes, you know, we do have expensive things featured on some pages in the magazine, but that's like just one small part of what the magazine does. And, you know, these are not things I buy, but I often like looking at them and I find them interesting and sort of tasteful in certain ways or elegant or something. And you know, there is a way that even things that may be out of reach financially for some readers are interesting to look at and sort of exciting just to know what's happening in other parts of the city. It's not a...
Well, there was a recent great example of that in the $2,000 an hour hooker.
It's true.
Nice to look at, exclusive, perhaps not something for everybody. But what I found interesting about that story was that it sort of captured a moment, but it also triggered all sorts of reactions. And the escort ring that she was associated with came crashing down, and she's in trouble now. Was that a coincidence that you just happened to catch it, or, you know?
Well, you know who wrote that story is Mark Jacobson, who I mentioned earlier, who wrote the Taxi story many years ago and has done many good pieces in between. And yeah, that was something. It had been covered a little bit in the newspaper, and Mark had found out about it, and he got really involved in it. He visited the sort of pimp guy in jail, got to know him, got to know his girlfriend, who was the $2,000 a night hooker, and you know, it's one of those things. It's a great story. It's just incredibly funny, and you know, while it is about sex, it's really about ambition. It's about incredible sort of striving, big vision of this guy had of what he could become, and so it takes place in the sex industry, but it also is the kind of story that is on Wall Street or in advertising, or it's about people wanting to become something else and the way that they can sometimes get carried away. So,
as a manager of talent, media talent, we're in an age now where 2 popular movies, one about Edward R. Murrow, another one about Truman Capote, the media figures, Maureen Dowd, and I'm talking about journalists now as opposed to entertainers, but the media figures themselves become part of the story or become the story or become... How is it to manage people like that?
Well, you know, fortunately we don't have, well, we have a lot of great writers. I don't know that we have any of the kind of you know, larger than life figures like Maureen Dowd writing for us, although we'd like to. You know, the truth is that the magazine it's not that hard managing the people we have, in large part because people really believe in the magazine. They want to be part of it, and they want to get accepted by their editors, and you have the pieces in there. And so everybody is so kind of focused on the same goal that I can't say it's that hard. We don't have sort of super large media figures on our staff. So maybe it's not surprising that it's pretty easy for us.
Not to make a bad pun, but magazines and newspapers seem to come in and out of vogue.
Sure.
There was a point in time where the Village Voice was the hot place where opinion leaders had to read it as soon as it came out.
Also edited for a while by Clay Felker.
The Observer also had a period where it was hugely influential. Not that it's not influential, but you know, in terms of where other editors and reporters would go for ideas. Even Time Out on sort of the entertainment side came into New York very strong, became the must-read. But each of them, they seem to go through some kind of a cycle.
Yeah.
How do you keep an institution like New York Magazine fresh?
Well, there are a couple of things. One, my boss, Adam Moss, who's the editor-in-chief of New York Magazine, is a pretty relentless guy, and he has worked in magazines for 25 years, and he has an unbelievable kind of enthusiasm for it, and an interest that is so intense and so unrelenting that the thing about him is that he has a personal passion for it, just for what magazines are and what they can be, and so that's a large part of how we keep it fresh, and also it's such a competitive environment now. It's not possible for us to just start putting out the same general thing every week. It would just disappear too quickly. The readership would go away too quickly. It's just not. If we want to have New York Magazine be a going concern, which it is now, it has to strive for greatness absolutely every week. And so, I think at other times, it wasn't necessarily like that. When the magazine economics were a little more stable, you could just print money by running big ads, and I don't know if it was ever easy like that, but it is certainly not easy now. So and everybody's aware of it.
You referenced Slate, that they had said nice things about,
we're very happy about that.
your issue. I guess to some extent, the online publications, even Craigslist, are now competition for you.
Yeah.
How has the web impacted on the magazine, and to what extent do you use the web through the online version to reach a different audience or a broader audience?
Well, it's really one of our website. We have a fantastic website that's both that both really captures what's in the magazine, but then it has all kinds of other sort of databases of restaurants, of bars, of things to do. We fortunately invested money pretty early on in making the web and having a serious presence on the web. But it is the way a lot of people now see the magazine. When we had the story on the $2,000 hooker, the web traffic just went through the roof. And it was very exciting to see, because there we did feel like we were reaching new readers. It is hard on a newsstand to find new readers now, because you've been to a newsstand. There's 5,000 magazines, and our magazine is often well placed, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what to put on the cover so that people are attracted and want to buy it. But it's hard just to pierce through all that noise. And on the internet, when people are looking for something, if they want to find a place to eat, or they want to find out about a particular thing that's happening in the city, and they use Google, and that our site comes up, I think we're finding a lot of people getting to the magazine that way, and we're trying to make an ever more sort of sophisticated web operation so that we can capture all kinds of different interests about New York and really do connect with new readers there.
My thanks to Hugo Lindgren, the editorial director of New York Magazine, and thank you for joining us. I'm Ken Fisher.